Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Steve Young, and I'm the Channel Marketing Manager here at Untangle. Today, we're going to have a tech talk on Policy Manager, and I have Chad Bin Naughton from our sales engineer team with us today, and he'll be your presenter. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Please use the audio panel on the right side of GoToWebinar to select how you want to listen in. If you have any audio questions or any audio issues, please go ahead and ask that in the chat as well, and maybe we can help you. Keep in mind that this webinar is going to be recorded so that you can view it later and go back and reference it whenever you want. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chad, and he'll take it away from here.
Right on. Thanks, Steve. As Steve said, this is a Tech Talks webinar. These are our deeper dives. If you're unfamiliar with Untangle, this is not a great webinar for you. We would push you to our 101 series first, likely. If you're experienced with Untangle and you've used Policy Manager before, you also probably know that this Tech Talks will not be very long. So we'll shoot for 30, 40 minutes. Policy Manager is pretty cut and dry. But what is it? So Policy Manager is going to allow you to define and manage network privileges based on a lot of different criteria: usernames, user groups, time of day of week, all kinds of things. So Policy Manager's main benefit to me is that it works with other apps, so you can create rules that leverage the entire NG Firewall package. So what we'll do is just run through a few slides here, and then we'll jump over to one of my live servers where I have some policies leveraged with Active Directory. So our only example today will be using Active Directory, though we can use Radius, Google, or local directory. So policies, you'll see these on our widget on our demo site. This is a screen grab from demo.untangle.com. So it's set up to be basically a small school. So if we look at that, we'll see teacher, student. Those are indented because they inherit. And then you can actually see the apps within the policy if you click on them. So your default policy is always going to act as the default permission set. Unless you specifically create a rule to send someone through a different policy, everyone goes through default. So you can basically set up default to be your baseline and then create policies that inherit those permissions, like our teacher policy and student policies. So as I said, you can do a child policy. This just keeps you from having to start over with every policy. Or you can just set it to be independent and not have a parent that it inherits rules from. So this is kind of a top-down list here you see. So teacher and student are both inheriting from default, but then student lab is inheriting from student. So that can get kind of tricky sometimes for you as an admin. Untangle doesn't really care. As if you have 100 policies, it just does its thing. For you as an admin, it can get a little cumbersome sometimes if you have too many, inheriting from above. So for me personally, I just kind of keep that clean. If I have 3 or 4 layers of inheriting, privileges, sometimes I start over fresh for the next rack and I just go from there. It's just kind of a personal flavor thing. But you can see that apps can be installed into each policy uniquely. So you can get really specific when you go into filtering for different groups and users, devices, however we're doing this. So we would be able to say, yes, you're going to inherit all these apps from default, but then maybe we just install custom web filtering for the teachers, for the students. A quick tip here, if you're not sure what apps are inheriting settings from another policy, you can always click on a policy like in this menu, and you'll see that list of apps. So you can always go out to the policy too, but if you're in Policy Manager right there, just click on the policy and it'll show you everything that's active. So Policy Manager rules. Now we're to the important part. These are always going to be applied in a top-down order. So if a session doesn't match a rule, it goes to the default policy. So that's what I was saying earlier. Default is your baseline. Everybody comes through that until you specify something different. So in this image here, you're seeing that we're doing time of day is noon to 1:30. We're going to send them to the lab policy instead of just the student policy where there's less throttling. It's their lunch break. Maybe they can watch some YouTube or something. The rules are crucial. If you don't create a rule, and I'll show you this on my server, everyone goes to default. So the rules are pretty open-ended, as you'll see, but I want you to be as specific as possible when you create rules. So under our little tip right here, if you do have a rule that's based on a username and then another rule based on an IP, the first rule in this rules list is the one that's applied. So if we're trying to catch someone by username and their IPs and a rule above that, we can switch those. As I said, these are pretty open-ended. I'll show you all the conditions that we leverage on my demo, but don't feel like you're pigeonholed into just usernames or user groups. We can say, tag is, MAC address is, MAC vendor is. There's a lot of different ways to do this. So Policy Manager, just like every app in Untangle, offers some reports. These could be accessed, via the app, the dashboard, the reports viewer, just like the rest of our apps. So it is somewhat limited. Obviously, there's only 4 or 5 reports by default, but it's things like bandwidth usage per policy, sessions for each policy, summaries, events. You can see, just traffic by policy. So there's a few reports right there. And as always, these can be customized, put on your dashboard, tweaked to be really whatever you need them to be. Untangle's reporting is as open-ended and customizable as it's ever been. So again, don't pigeonhole yourself into thinking this is all the reporting you can get. We can always help customize some stuff. So let me get out of the slide deck real quick and we'll jump over to my live server here. If it's connected, it is. So this is a live device that is leveraging an Active Directory server. So when we talk Policy Manager, I feel like we need to talk about a couple of other apps as well. Directory Connector is kind of step one if you have something leveraging username authentication. So if you're an organization that has something like Active Directory, we would obviously want to leverage that. Then we can do all of this by username or group. So I'm going to focus completely on an Active Directory scenario right now. This is what I have connected to this device. But you could do this with Radius. You could do it with our local directory for usernames as well. So what we're going to look at is basically just a quick verification that I'm connected to my Active Directory server. So Directory Connector, part of our complete package is what would leverage that for me. So this would be kind of step one to get those usernames coming in for my policy management. You can see I'm connected to an Active Directory here. If I run a quick test, I'll hopefully have a successful connection. So good, I'm connected. So now I have users and groups available. So if I want to see my usernames and the groups that they're in, I can click right here. This is going to hit AD and show me what's on that domain controller. So you can see I have all these users right here. So we're connected. The next step would be to install the Untangle User Notification API on the domain controller. That's what actually presents a username to us. From there, I can go into Policy Manager and create policies. So you can see right now I'm on my default policy. I only have one created here and it's called Wi-Fi. So I want different rules for my Wi-Fi users. That's inheriting from default though. What that actually looks like, if we click on Wi-Fi, you'll see most of these apps grayed out because they're inheriting from above. But I've come and customized settings for web filter and application control. This is Wi-Fi. So these are mobile devices. I need mobile device management, basically. So I installed application control with different rules. And this policy also has a captive portal where I'm saying, agree to our terms. If I need to, I can also leverage that same authentication. So if you do have a policy that requires authentication in a captive portal, we can come over here and change this to basic login. We'll leverage your Active Directory, your OAuth, whatever it is we've got. And then when they get their captive portal presented to them on the Wi-Fi, they'll be able to sign in with a username and actual password. So that's per policy. If I need different rules for the Wi-Fi users, for example, for virus blocking, that's pretty different kind of traffic, right? Maybe on my Wi-Fi than my local network. So I probably want to customize their virus blocker a little. So I'm just going to install this for them. Took about that long, and now I can go customize those settings. So let's take a quick look at Policy Manager. We can do that right here from the app, or we can do it from here. This is the same exact button, just 2 different places. So this is taking me into the Policy Manager app. So when you get in here, there is a status. This is where you can get those reports that we were talking about. If you want to see, sessions by policy, traffic. If you just want to click all events, that'll basically show you everything happening on that policy. Luckily, this is kind of a sandboxed demo machine, so we don't have a whole lot of traffic coming through. And as I said, I don't have a whole lot of policies. So Wi-Fi is inheriting from default. Again, you can click here to see the apps that are running and enabled. And you'll see the same kind of grayed out action. So if I wanted to, I could also install those from here into the policy. So I have these 3 policies, but if we come over here to rules, I only have a rule for admin. So I probably need to make a rule for that Wi-Fi policy as well, because as it stands, everyone but admins are going through default. So this one here is leveraging that username. If your username is administrator, you come to the admin policy. So if we wanted to create a rule for Wi-Fi, let's see. As I said, there are a lot of ways to do this. So if we wanted to do this by IPs, by interface, something like that would be super easy. Just say non-WAN. I think there's a lot of open-endedness to this, and I can't overemphasize how many options you have. So please don't think this is going to stick you into having to use Active Directory or OAuth or something like that. We could say, Mac vendor is. All the Apple devices now will go to my Wi-Fi policy, my admin policy. There's a ton of conditions, is the kind of long story short. So even if we wanted to say client user agent, like a mobile OS, I could also say user in group. So we saw username up there. This is a really handy one too, though. So you could say group is, and then you'll come over here and you'll actually see your drop downs. So maybe anyone in the administrators group will go to admins, like I was saying. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. Active Directory makes it easier. But we can do, multiple conditions. So maybe if you're an administrator and it's between noon and 1:30 on Mondays, you come to the Wi-Fi policy, et cetera, et cetera. So like I said, this is a really valuable tool. It's a big part of our complete package, and it's kind of one of our top sellers. We want to be able to manage policy like this throughout your Untangle system. And the way we get granular is policies. So whether it's just one big blanket rule for everyone, or if we want to even be more specific within a policy, you can technically come out to your Wi-Fi policy and come into web filter. And then in our rules section, you can actually create more inclusions and exemptions for traffic here. So you could, for example, say inside this Wi-Fi policy, this one username, we're going to say British guy, has access to, let's say, social networking. Keep in mind, I'm still within my Wi-Fi policy. This is just inside our web filter application. So this is a really cool thing we can do, because this person will be inside the Wi-Fi policy being blocked, but they authenticate and they're actually going to get some different permissions. So it's just a kind of a little pro tip that I like to give folks on webinars and when we do these demonstrations, because Untangle is as modular a product as I can find in our industry. And options like that are not necessarily tucked away, but we tend to lean on things like policy management and policy creation rather than just a quick little inclusion like that. But that's just a little trick to keep in your pocket, because that is something we can do too. If you don't want to go create tons of policies, if you don't have Policy Manager yet, you can do a little bit of that in Web Filter, but Policy Manager will obviously make this a lot simpler and more of a truly separated filtering solution. So we can actually come in and say, if your username is on this IP and it's this time of day, this day of week, you go over here. So we can be really, really, really open-ended. The other thing I wanted to talk about with policy management and creating rules real quick as a condition were tags. So tags are an interesting thing with Untangle, and I feel like a lot of folks don't utilize these. I could, for example, say tagged is Wi-Fi. Go to the Wi-Fi policy. Tags are really handy because we can use them in a few different places. So the manual way to do a tag is over here under your devices menu. If, for example, I knew that this iPhone was always looking at pornography, I could say not safe for work and tag them forever. What I'm tagging on this menu is their MAC address. So that tag's not going to go away if I tell it not to. So I can then leverage that tag in policy. So this is a really handy thing, because if we want to, we could set up automated tagging as well. So under config events triggers, this is one of my favorite kind of tucked away features in Untangle, because this automates that tagging for you. So if we're, for example, looking at rule number 2 here, this is going to tag someone using the BitTorrent mobile app. So we're pulling from application control logs, mobile applications, and we're looking for that actual application signature. And yes, it's spelled incorrectly. That's just how they spell it in the database. So I copy and paste those. Then you can see the action down here. We can tag the host, the user, or the device, depending on how we're seeing people. So if I want to, I can tag the device. I can target its local address there, and I could just tag it as a BitTorrent use or BitTorrenter, whatever we want. The default tag is set to 5 minutes, and that doesn't seem like it's a long time, but that's more than enough time for Untangle to see that tag and then say, oh, well, you're using BitTorrent suddenly. That means you're going to come over here to this policy. So we would just have to keep that straight in the policy rules. And then if this is presented, that's an interesting thing we can do with basically routing to a different policy. So maybe someone's on your network not doing anything wrong for half the day, but then they decide they're going to start torrenting on their mobile device, and they pull up the BitTorrent app. This will let us see that, and we don't have to really do a manual tagging process like we do on the others. So these rules are really, really, really open-ended for the actual triggers on the tag conditions. So if you want to, you can pull from pretty much any table in Untangle. And then you can also add thresholds to set those up if you don't want to go over a certain time frame, if you don't want to exceed certain limits. And then, like I said, we do have a couple of different ways to tag these folks or to untag them if we need to. So that's a handy thing, I feel, for policy management, because Untangle works with some really, really small businesses, by design. That's kind of our niche. And to me, working in pre-sales, in my experience, not many 3 or 4 or 5 employee businesses have something like Active Directory. That's kind of expensive. Untangle doesn't use Active Directory even. We're a pretty small business. So I really, really try to reiterate not getting stuck on Active Directory or usernames, things like that for policy creation, but it does obviously make it simpler. So if you have access to it, I would recommend, probably leveraging our complete package here. So you have Directory Connector and Web Filter, but the policy manager itself is included, of course. And then you could do that by the usernames, by IP, really whatever we want. That's more or less a breakdown of Policy Manager. As I said, it is not extremely complicated. We do have some really great documentation on our support site and on our wiki, and we'll go over that a little bit. And I have some FAQs I'm going to go through on the slide deck here. But let's jump back over to the slide deck here real quick and see if we've got any questions that have been kind of rolling in. Steve, are there any questions out there we could get answered maybe?
No, it seems like people don't have any questions, so at least none
All
that
right.
I can see. Or actually, hold on. Oh, sorry about that. My question window was a little. So some of these questions have been answered, but how do you filter by just the category?
How do you filter by just a category? That's a strange question. I think what you mean is within web filtering, I would think. Category isn't really something that you would set up a policy by. So we would need to do that probably in web filter, unless I'm misunderstanding. And in web filter, the categories are just on the categories list. This is our kind of starting point. So you'll see a few things blocked by default. If that's what you're talking about, these are the categories that we would pull. We don't set up policy by categories. We would set up policy by IP or interface or username, and then we would come in here and we would change their filtering around based on the categories they needed filtered. Unless I misunderstood, please tell us if I did.
He was talking about triggers to tag and block.
Okay, you would basically do those with web filter events. So if we're under there and you can see like the one we looked at here for BitTorrent, this is pulling from application control logs. So if you wanted to set up a trigger based on something like that, you would come down to like HTTP events, and then we would have more options for like and then we would have a little more options and be able to throw in like a URL. But yeah, the automated tagging is so open-ended. So there's really, I don't think there's a table we can't pull from, or an event log. So this is where you find all those right there under the class. So this is where they're going to pull from, and then we can come in here and say, the request line. There's a lot of events in here under sessions. So we just want to look at domain or host for like a URL. Or if it's a full URI request, we could do that with things like HTTPS decryption. So that's how we would do it. We would just change that table to be HTTP. I would probably do request, I guess, for outgoing, and then you could just come in here and change those fields to be basically whatever you're looking for. So that's kind of how we would do that on the alert. If that explanation was a little quick, please email us at support@untangle.com. We can give you a better answer and shoot you some documentation and walk you through the steps on how to create this stuff. I won't say that the alert system here, the trigger system, is the easiest system in Untangle. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but once you've created 2 or 3 of these, I think it gets pretty easy and it's pretty much intuitive. It's just what app do I want to create, my trigger from? What do I want to pull then from that app's events and tables? So once you've made a couple, I think it's a lot easier to do, obviously. But if you want to, just let us know. We can walk you through the first 1 or 2 and then shoot you some documentation, that kind of stuff as well.
All right, sounds good. Another question is there a way to copy policies from one rack to another? Sometimes when setting up a school, it is difficult to set up each policy with each rack.
Yeah, you could basically do that by sort of setting up the default and inheriting from there. The other option that you would have, though, that you should talk to us about would be whether or not you're leveraging Command Center. So that's our cloud-hosted centralized management. That's where all your account lives on Untangle.com now. And we now create and push policy through the cloud with Untangle's Command Center. That's a little bit bigger conversation than a quick question, I think, in a webinar. So maybe email us that, because we do have some docs on how to do that. But that's, I think that's probably the better answer now, is creating a policy in Command Center. Then you can push that to different devices. Pushing them between racks isn't really a thing just yet. So you would just inherit and then tweak them from there.
Awesome. Google.com is blocked as we live in Canada. It uses google.ca, but google.com should work. Is it possible to create a policy to allow it?
Yeah, you should be able to create a separate policy and then just go into web filter and alter their blacklist or whitelist. So in web filter, you could do a quick lookup and say, let's do CA first. I hope this says, search engines. Good. So Google.com should hopefully say the same thing. So if you're blocking search engines, obviously that'll both get blocked. But what you can do if you need to is just copy that right there, or come over here to path sites. And when I do a path site entry, I usually do them like this. That'll basically catch everything. You could also kind of just do Google, but that would really open up CA and EU and everything. So if you want to really isolate it, I would probably do something like this. Google.com is now available. Google is open, but we're not looking at the CA site really. So that might be a little bit tricky. I think we could probably do this pretty simply with a whitelist rule. That's something I might need to test, though, because Google is Google and things change with them. So being able to block the CA search engine and allow the .com search engine, as far as I know, is a pretty simple thing like this. But if that's giving you trouble or it's not working for you, just let us know. Maybe it's something we need to dive into and retest, because like I said, Google kind of does their own thing anymore, and we all just kind of play along and keep up. We, for example, now block Google's quick protocol by default in our web filter. It's UDP, but it comes across port 443, and it's kind of strange. So we just block that by default because it creates a lot of false positives and things like that in content filtering. To me, the short, easy answer is to throw that into a whitelist. If you have trouble with that, if it's not working, just let us know. That may be something we need to dive in and test a little more, or do some tweaks with the rule, that kind of thing.
Okay, there are a ton of questions. So we're just trying to get through them as quickly as possible. We have a couple of people on here on our staff answering as fast as possible. How can you throttle certain users' tags after they reach a specific download threshold quota?
So we wouldn't do that necessarily all the way through the tagging system. We would use bandwidth control for that. So bandwidth control offers quotas. It then offers rules to punish users when they're above quotas. So yeah, let's just run through this here real quick. So if we look at my bandwidth control setup wizard, this is where you tell it to do quotas. So I'm going to run through. You see I have my 2 WANs set here. So we have some templates now that will do different things for you, and you can scroll through these and see what the differences are. I'm going to go nonprofit, and then I'm going to go enable quotas. So we can do quotas for hosts or users. Depends on how you want to do it. We can do this daily, weekly, monthly, hourly. So if you want to say everyone gets a gig of data for the day, then when they exceed that, we throttle them based on what you want to do. Limited severely is, quote unquote, throttled to death. These numbers, however, all come from quality of service. So if you have not set up QoS, that setup wizard right here in bandwidth control will force you to do that. If you want to do that preemptively, go to Config Network Advanced, Quality of Service. I've got mine enabled. This box has 2 WANs, so we need both WANs entered. And I'm pretty generous with these speeds. This is kilobits per second. You can see, so times 1,000. I'm pretty generous because if I'm paying for 120 megs down, I'm going to tell Untangle I get 150, just in case I get like a burst from Comcast. We'll see all that. And then so when we come over to rules, you'll see that there's some built-in rules for VoIP because we bypass those by default. But these priorities are what I wanted to show you. This is where they come from. So when I say quote unquote throttle to death, that's talking about 5% of my maximum download bandwidth if nobody else above them is online. So maybe 5% is too much, right? Maybe you have 10 gig fiber coming in. 5% is still a lot of bandwidth. So the lowest you can go right here is 0.1%. So if you need to, this is where those numbers live. This is how we shape traffic that we're bypassing. But those numbers are also leveraged for traffic we're filtering. So that's how we would do that. Excuse me, you would run through your bandwidth control setup wizard. You would enable quotas. And then if you need to, you can say, when you exceed your quota, we throttle you however much you want to. So that's actually all done in bandwidth control, but you can do that specifically for different policies, right? I was doing that on my default policy. Maybe I would rather do that for Wi-Fi. That's actually kind of more accurate. This is where I would want to do throttling on mobile devices. So I won't necessarily block YouTube on your iPad, but I'm not going to give you all the bandwidth, right? I'm maybe not blocking BitTorrent, but I will throttle it. So that's how we do that right there in bandwidth control.
Cool. And kind of related to that, would you be able to reset someone or a device's quota?
That is actually a little harder. Especially depending on if you have it set for like daily, something like that. I don't know of a quick, easy way to go just reset a quota. So I think that may be this. I may be telling tales out of school. I have to go look. That may be a feature request that's currently sitting on our feature site. I'll go look just because if it's not, we might as well throw it on there. I currently don't know of a great way to just go reset the quotas. If I'm wrong about that, anyone else on the call, please correct me. JC, if you know a trick I don't know, let me know. But I don't know of a way to just go reset someone's quota easily.
Okay. I guess we will try to find out and then reach out to you after this webinar.
Yeah, exactly. And anybody, if we're not answering all your questions, we obviously won't be able to get to all of them. Please email us at support@untangle.com, or you can get our sales engineers at presales@untangle.com, or your sales rep at sales@untangle.com. Obviously, some of these are big questions, and we're pretty limited in time on these Tech Talk webinars. So if we do kind of gloss over your question or not even get to it, please don't hesitate to reach out and just let us know.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions you have. So that's all the questions so far that have been asked.
Let's jump over. I think we probably touched on a couple of these frequently asked questions just now, but let's go see what my slide has to say. When should I create a policy? Well, I say do it on Tuesdays, but honestly, you should just create a new policy when you want to apply different rules to different users. So I showed you the quick little dirty trick, in web filter. You could do it right there in your default policy if you wanted to, but that's only going to see, mobile apps and websites. So if we needed to do separate, like we were just talking about, separate traffic shaping, that's a good use case for a new policy. Anytime you need to just kind of, not necessarily physically separate traffic, we're not talking about subnetting or anything, but if you need to just, weed people out, keep the teachers over here and the students over here, that's a really great example of when to create a policy. Can I use my Active Directory groups to create policies for different groups? Well, yeah, we've mentioned that a bit. So Directory Connector obviously is a prerequisite for that. So what we were looking at on my server is the Untangle NG complete package. If you have Active Directory, if you want to create policies and then filter the web, The complete package is by far your best value. All of Untangle's apps are available individually. You know, you can a la carte a package if you want to, just put your own software package together. But based on my experience, if you get through Directory Connector, Policy Manager, and Web Filter and Bandwidth Control, our site will actually tell you to switch to the complete package so you can save a little money. So just keep that in mind. If you go to untangle.com and click the buy button in the top right, you can put your own package together and see what the prices are. But if you do create your own package, we'll let you know if you're getting above the base price for the complete package, then you can switch. I'm using Untangle's OpenVPN app. Do I need to create policies for the VPN users? You don't have to create extra policies to use OpenVPN. It's, by default, they'll go through the default policy. But you could use the firewall app to allow or deny those users access to certain resources, or you could create a policy only for those users. So you could actually say interface is OpenVPN, and say policy for VPN users. So maybe you want to throttle certain services, if people are watching Netflix over your VPN, that kind of thing. Not ideal, really, but they're coming through Untangle, and it's just like any other host. Once they're coming through Untangle, you can do whatever you want with them. But also, if you don't want OpenVPN traffic filtered at all, just create a rule for all OpenVPN clients and select no policy as the target policy. So we could always bypass that traffic as well, and then let it just kind of do its stuff at layer 3 with quality of service and still shape it too. So lastly, I only want to scan inbound email traffic, not outbound. Do I need to create a new policy? You do not. By default, outbound email traffic is not scanned. If you want it to be, that option is available in Spam Blocker. We highly recommend against it for the most part. Scanning outbound email isn't really practical to scan for the most part. It's coming from your network. It should be safe already. So it's just resource intensive processing that we don't need sometimes. So if you need it, it's there. It's off by default for a reason though. But that's under Spam Blocker settings if you use Spam Blocker. And again, if you're new to Untangle, like I said, this may be over your head. Spam Blocker in Untangle will only work for mail server, SMTP. So it's only looking at port 25 anyway. So if you don't have a mail server, if you use Office or Gmail, you don't even have to install that app really, and they'll do all the scanning for you. So we do also offer some professional services. If you need, more than 30, 40 minutes on the phone that a support tech can afford you, we do offer these services, and you can actually kind of book one of our technicians or one of our pre-sales engineers for a couple hours of dedicated support. So whether you're coming from another device, maybe you're replacing a Sonic wall with an Untangle, we could actually get your Sonic wall config and convert that to your Untangle config before we even send you the device. If you're running us in a virtual environment like VMware, you're using your own hardware and you want help installing and configuring, we have our installation configuration service. The top seller, the one that flies off the shelves, is the system optimization service. It's a real reasonable thing. I think it starts at like $240, and that gives you 2 hours of dedicated time with one of our support engineers. And it's more of an appointment and a separate order. So if you ordered Untangle software, you could order a system optimization service with it to get you set up and all that, or you could wait a month. If you don't think it's doing everything, you can order an optimization service then. The system optimization service is the only service we offer that you can buy after your purchase. So install and config and conversion are both part of your installation setup. System optimization, you could order one of those a month for a year if you wanted to. With our complete package, you also have live support, so you can call our support team out here in Colorado and get help anytime you need. They keep winning awards for us. We only have 4 support techs for 50,000 installs worldwide, but they have a 100% satisfaction rate last month. So our support team is something I'll put up in front of pretty much any other company in this industry. So don't be shy about calling us if you need us. We are in Mountain Time out here, so it's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. But if it's outside of that and we just need to make a little appointment, like I said, the system optimization service is real reasonable, and it's just them with you on the phone for a couple hours going through your entire config and just basically turning on all the bells and whistles that you want. So that's going to wrap it up for us. I'll toss it over to Steve here at the end to close out. I did want to mention this is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, the whole month of October, and Untangle is running a 15% off software promo. So if you buy software this month from us, you can throw in the code CYBER15. You'll get 15% off that thing. We are doing some other promos and things like that all the time. So just check untangle.com and see what's going on that month. If you have any questions, you can always email us at sales@untangle.com. You can call us and get in touch with a rep. And as I said earlier, we also have pre-sales at untangle.com. That's my team. And support. If you want to just open a support ticket and ask questions over there. You can also just go to untangle.com. There's a lot of resources there. We have a lot of new videos on our YouTube. We're doing more interactive training and things like that. This webinar will obviously be uploaded today or tomorrow. Please don't be shy about contacting us, whether it's through the forums or any of these email channels or the phone. We're always here. We're always willing to help. And we rely really greatly on our community for features and questions. If you want to tell us a feature, please go to feedback.untangle.com and punch in a feature request. And Untangle employees and the user community will actually go in and upvote your features now. I'm going to pass it back over to Steve. Are there any other quick little questions we could close out with? Anything come in?
Just a couple of questions on where the recording will be made available. We will always have email go out from GoToWebinar with the recording, and as well as all of our webinars are on our YouTube channel, and I believe somebody just posted that in the answer form. So Perfect. Go ahead and go to our user YouTube channel, and then also you'll get an email in your email about where the recording lives. So you can always come back and watch it again. We have one question on.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, that question disappeared real quick. Mutual authentication. So the question is, can the admin interface be configured for mutual authentication? And mutual authentication requires a client certificate to establish the SSL session.
So you're saying mutual authentication. Does that mean two-factor authentication, right? We don't, not really, no. We have two-factor authentication in Command Center now. The Untangle box itself doesn't offer that. The only really aspect that we offer would be like through OpenVPN. OpenVPN client has two-factor authentication. The VPN cert, is your first factor, and then we leverage username, password from somewhere. That's the only thing I could really think of that would count. But like I said, if that's something you want and we don't do it, please go to feedback.untangle.com and tell us to do it. That's we're getting into more like varied roles for admins on the server and through Command Center and things like that. So I think that's probably at least on the radar. Something like that. But as it stands now, yeah, there's no real multi-factor authentication on the box, simultaneous authentication, unless you're leveraging, like I said, OpenVPN or something.
Okay.
And sorry, Steve, I just went over here to our resources page. This is untangle.com resources. This is where all of our white papers and videos and everything. If, like Steve said, you'll get an email for this video with a link. But if you want to go find one that's a little older, just click right here. That'll take you to our YouTube. And that's officially all I've got.
All right, well, in that case, we will end that here. We'll try to follow up with everyone's questions that have asked questions and are unanswered.
You bet.
If you need help with the installation, reach out to support@untangle.com and we can have somebody help you with your installation.
Yeah, you bet. There's also on our download page here, there's a lot of documentation about installing Untangle. If you need it, there's a lot of different options. Our actual installation is on our wiki right here. So if you need the installation guide, you can just click right there.
Yeah, but if you have problems though, definitely reach out to support@untangle.com and somebody from our support team could definitely walk you through it.
You bet.
All right, I guess that's it for today, and thank you all for joining us today and having all those wonderful questions. We will definitely be reaching out to everyone after this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks.